At 1 o'clock in the morning, my porch light flickered across the front yard of my small house in Riverton, Arizona. The night air was dry, still carrying the faint hum of motorcycles from kids racing down the highway. Then came the pounding on my door. It wasn't the kind of knock that asked politely. It was frantic, uneven, desperate. "Mom, please open up." I froze. It was Lena, my daughter. I pulled open the deadbolt, and before I could take a breath, she collapsed into my arms. Her lip was split, her left eye swollen shut. Her hands clutched her stomach as if to hold herself together. In that moment, my body chose instinct over thought. I carried her inside, laid her on the sofa, and covered her with the nearest blanket. Then I looked up at the corner of my hallway where my police uniform hung, pressed and ready. I knew tonight I wasn't just a mother, I was also an officer, and both would be tested. I should tell you who we are before the rest of this story unfolds. My name is Patricia Calder, but most people in Riverton call me Pat. I have worked as a patrol sergeant in this desert town for over 2 decades. Riverton isn't big, but it's the kind of place where everyone thinks they know everyone else's business. Rumors travel faster than the monsoon winds. My daughter Lena is 26. She grew up chasing lizards in our backyard, singing along to every song on the radio, and promising me she would always find her way back home. Lately, she had grown quieter, more withdrawn, but I convinced myself it was just the stress of adulthood. I wanted to believe she was fine. There's one more piece you should know. My father left us a piece of land outside town. He worked hard for it, and it now stands in Lena's name. That land would soon become the center of a storm we never expected. The sound of Lena's voice still echoed in my ears as I tried to steady her trembling body. Her face was pale, her breath shallow. I fetched a damp towel from the kitchen and gently pressed it against her split lip, whispering for her to stay calm. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my head. I knew this was more than a bruise or two. Something had been broken long before she collapsed on my porch. I reached for my phone and dialed the emergency room. "Dr. Patel, it's Pat," I said. "Get a bed ready. I'm bringing my daughter." My car was in the shop, so I called for a cab. While we waited, Lena's phone lit up on the coffee table, buzzing again and again. On the screen were missed calls and threatening messages from Eric, her husband. My blood boiled. One message read, "Don't open your mouth if you want to keep everything." I reached for the phone, but Lena snatched it back with shaking hands. "Mom, don't, please, it will only make it worse." Her voice was ragged, soaked with fear. I wanted to demand answers, but instead I squeezed her hand. "I'm here, honey. You're safe now." Inside, I made a silent promise. This night would not pass without a record. We were starting a paper trail he couldn't erase. When we arrived at Riverton General, the fluorescent lights of the emergency room cut through the night like a blade. Dr. Anaka Patel, a woman I had worked with on countless late-night calls, met us at the door. Her eyes moved quickly from Lena's swollen face to the way she held her side. Without hesitation, she guided us to an exam room. Nurses helped Lena onto the bed. They checked her vitals, gently lifted her blouse, and gasped at the dark bruise spreading across her stomach. Dr. Patel ordered X-rays and a CT scan to rule out internal bleeding. She moved with calm precision, but I saw the concern in her eyes. As Lena was prepped, I quietly asked the charge nurse for a copy of every photo and every note that would go into her medical record. "I need documentation," I said softly. She nodded. While machines hummed in the background, Lena squeezed my hand, whispering, "Don't let him find me." I leaned close, my voice steady. "He won't, not while I'm breathing." Before sunrise, we had discharge papers, imaging results, and a folder of medical photographs sealed for evidence. It was not just treatment, it was testimony written in ink and images. I tucked the file under my arm and walked out of the hospital, knowing this was only the beginning. Back at home, the first rays of sun stretched across the street. As I stepped onto the porch, I noticed my neighbor, Mrs. Dolores Park, sweeping her front walk. She paused when she saw me and hurried over, her face lined with worry. "Pat, I heard pounding and crying last night. Is everything all right?" I hesitated, then told her the truth in a low voice. "It was Lena. Eric hurt her. She came here in the middle of the night." Dolores's jaw tightened, her broom clutched like a weapon. "That man has no shame," she muttered. Then her eyes lit with sudden purpose. "My porch camera records everything. Maybe it caught her arriving." Together we opened the app on her phone. There it was, 10:02 a.m. Lena knocking weakly at my door, her voice faint but desperate. Hearing those sobs again made my chest ache, but I also knew this was crucial. I asked Dolores to send me a copy. She pressed my hand. Whatever you need, I'll testify. Back inside, I saved the footage onto an encrypted drive and backed it up on my laptop. For the first time, I felt the scales tip. We had evidence outside my word, outside my dot. Tears fear. Proof had begun to take shape. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from Caleb Morton, a clerk I had known for years at the county records office. His voice was tense. "Pat, your name and Lena's just showed up on a land transfer file. It didn't sit right with me, so I thought I should warn you." My stomach tightened. "What transfer?" Caleb sighed. "According to the paperwork, your daughter signed her piece of property over to a woman named Tara Quinn. But Pat, the signatures look wrong, and the notary on the stamp wasn't even on duty that day." I drove straight to his office. Caleb slid a folder across the desk. The shaky handwriting on the page didn't resemble Lena's. My own name was scribbled too, awkward and slanted. It was a forgery in plain sight. "This came in from Eric," Caleb whispered. "He told the staff you asked him to file it because you were busy." I clenched the folder until my knuckles whitened. My father had worked himself ragged to secure that land. It was Lena's inheritance, a piece of our family story. Now Eric was trying to steal it with a pen. I asked Caleb for certified copies of every page. He nodded quickly but warned, "Be careful, someone inside helped push this through." Walking out with the file under my arm, I knew we weren't just fighting bruises anymore. We were up against lies written in ink. The next morning I drove to Malaloy Trading Post, the pawn shop Eric ran on the edge of town. The place smelled of motor oil and stale cigarettes. Two of his buddies leaned against the counter, their eyes narrowing as I walked past. One smirked. "Well, if it isn't the mother-in-law." I ignored him and pushed through the office door. Eric was behind a battered desk counting stacks of bills. He looked up with a mocking grin. "Sergeant Calder, you here to buy or to nag?" I set a folder on the desk and slid it across to, "Oh him." Inside were the photos of Lena's injuries, the ER report, still frames from Dolores's camera, and the forged deed Caleb had given me. Each page was a nail in his coffin. Eric's grin faltered for just a second, then returned. "And what do you expect me to do with this? I've got better lawyers than you." I met his eyes, my voice steady. "I don't expect you to do anything. The court will handle it." He leaned forward, voice sharp. "That girl of yours needed discipline. Don't think your badge will always save you." The words made my blood boil, but I stayed still. I gathered the file, stood, and looked him squarely in the eye. "From now on, it's not your rules, it's the law." Then I walked out, leaving his anger echoing behind me. By the end of the week, the gossip mill in Riverton was churning at full speed. At the farmer's market, I caught whispers trailing behind me. "She's just a cop using her badge to get even with her son-in-law." At the diner, I overheard, "Lena probably made the whole thing up. You know how young wives are." Each word stung like a thorn, but I kept walking, head high. That night, when I returned home, I found an unmarked envelope shoved under my front door. Inside was a scrap of paper scrawled in uneven handwriting. "Shut up, or you'll lose your daughter." My hands trembled as I read it, not from fear, but from fury. I slipped the note into the evidence folder, knowing one day it would be read under oath. I called Captain Joel Ramirez, my superior at the station. "We need extra patrols near my neighbor Dolores Park's house. Lena is staying there, and I won't risk Eric's men sniffing around." His voice was firm but carried a hint of concern. "Pat, you're walking a dangerous line, but I'll cover you. Just keep everything documented." The rumors grew louder, but so did my determination. I realized the battle wasn't just against Eric, it was against the story he was spreading to bury the truth. I knew the case would stay weak unless someone from Eric's inner circle came forward. That person was Tara Quinn, the Oman who had been parading on his arm while Lena nursed bruises at home. I learned she often spent evenings at the Silver Spur, a dimly lit bar at the far end of Hidalgo Street. One Thursday night, I put on an old jacket and cap, slipped into a corner booth, and waited. Around 10, Tara walked in wearing a red dress, her lips painted dark, a drink in her hand. She looked confident, but her eyes carried the weight of someone in over her head. I slid an envelope across the table. Inside were copies of the forged deed with her name on it and public records of her debts. "Eric can't protect you," I said quietly, "but the truth might." She laughed at first, but her hand trembled as she flipped through the papers. The color drained from her face. He promised me land, a new start. I see now he just used me. Leaning closer, I told her, "You have one chance to walk away clean. Testify. Tell the court what really happened." Tara hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'll do it, but you have to promise I'll be safe." For the first time, I felt the tide begin to turn. At Marcus Hale's law office, we spread the evidence across a long oak table: photos of Lena's bruises, the ER report with Dr. Patel's signature, Dolores's video clip, the threatening note, and now the forged deed with Tara's name. Piece by piece, it formed a wall Eric could not climb. Marcus spoke with the calm focus of a man who had built cases like this before. Exhibit A, medical records. Exhibit B, the video. Exhibit C, the texts and threats. Exhibit D, the fraudulent deed and notary inconsistencies. He tapped each file as if anchoring it to the table. I added copies of Tara's written statement, notarized that morning, promising to testify about Eric's pressure and false promises. Marcus looked at me and said, "This gives us leverage, but we need protection orders in place immediately." That same afternoon, Judge Keaton signed a temporary restraining order barring Eric from contacting Lena or Tara. Captain Ramirez arranged safe lodging for both women away from Eric's reach. For the first time in weeks, I slept without pacing the hallway. The case was no longer a scattered set of fears. It was a structured defense, a living shield of fact. Rumors could twist, but evidence stood firm. The courthouse was packed the morning of the hearing. Wooden benches groaned under the weight of neighbors, co-workers, and strangers, curious to see what would unfold. The air buzzed with whispers until Judge Raymond Keaton entered and called the room to order. Marcus Hale rose first. "Your Honor, this case is not about rumor. It is about records, injuries, and evidence that speaks for itself." He began with the medical file. Dr. Patel took the stand, explaining Lena's contusions and why they could not have come from a simple fall. Her testimony was calm, clinical, and devastating. Next came the video. On the screen, Dolores's porch camera showed Lena at 10:02 a.m., knocking weakly, her voice breaking through the quiet street. Gasps echoed through the courtroom as people saw with their own eyes what words alone could not capture. Then Marcus presented the threatening text messages. Each message was authenticated by phone logs. The words glared from the projector. "Don't open your mouth if you want to keep everything." The forged deed followed. Clerk Caleb Morton testified to the inconsistencies, pointing out the notary stamp that did not match official logs. It was irrefutable proof that Eric had tried to steal the Calder family land. Finally, Tara Quinn stepped forward. Her voice shook, but she told the truth. "Eric promised me a share if I signed the papers. He said Lena would never fight back, but he lied to me and he lied to her." Eric shot up from his chair, shouting, "You traitor!" The judge's gavel slammed down. When it was my turn, I stood tall in my uniform. "I am a police officer, but today I am here as a mother. The man who hurt my daughter and forged our names is not a protector, he is an abuser, and the law must answer." Eric's lawyer, Victor Ames, tried to twist the narrative, suggesting extortion and bias, but each rebuttal fell against the hard surface of documented proof. By the time Marcus closed, the room was silent. The evidence had spoken louder than gossip ever could. Everyone knew the truth. Judge Keaton returned after a long pause, his voice steady as he read the ruling. First, a protective order for Lena, guaranteeing Eric cannot contact her under any circumstance. Second, the deed transferred to Tara Quinn is nullified, restoring the property to its rightful owner. Third, all of Eric's assets are frozen pending investigation. Finally, the case is referred to the district attorney's office for charges of domestic violence, fraud, and witness intimidation. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Eric slumped back in his chair, his face drained of color. Two deputies approached and snapped handcuffs around his wrists. The sound of metal clicking shut rang through the room like a final verdict. As they led him out, I caught a glimpse of his eyes, once smug and unshaken, now clouded with panic. I reached for Lena's hand. She was trembling, but for the first time in weeks, she exhaled a breath that sounded like freedom. Justice had not erased her pain, but it had carved a path towards safety. In the weeks that followed, life didn't simply return to normal. Healing rarely moves in straight lines. Lena often woke in the middle of the night, her body jolting upright from nightmares. Sometimes she cried out, convinced Eric was at the door. Each time I sat by her side, holding her hand until her breathing slowed. Dr. Naomi Winters, the therapist Marcus recommended, began meeting with Lena twice a week. Slowly, Lena learned grounding exercises, counting objects in the room, steadying her breath, writing down her fears instead of burying them. It wasn't magic, but it gave her tools to face the darkness. Small victories appeared like scattered sunlight. Lena walked to the store alone without scanning every doorway. She cooked dinner and hummed along to an old song she once loved. The first time I heard her laugh again, it caught me off guard and nearly brought me to tears. As for me, I carried this case into my daily patrols. Each time I met a woman afraid to speak, I shared resources, a phone number, or simply a listening ear. I wanted them to know silence feeds the pain, but truth, even slow, even heavy, can set a person free. If you are listening to this and parts of Lena's story feel familiar, I want you to know there are practical steps you can take. First, if you are in immediate danger, call emergency services. Your safety comes before everything else. Second, document what is happening. Take photos of injuries with a phone or camera that records date and time. Save threatening texts or voicemails and back them up to a cloud folder or external drive. Small details can become powerful evidence later. Third, seek medical help. Ask for printed discharge summaries and make sure the records describe every injury. Hospitals often take photos that can be stored in your file. Ask for copies or reference numbers. Fourth, check public property records. If you suspect fraud, request certified copies of deeds and compare signatures. Notary logs can reveal inconsistencies that matter in court. Finally, reach out for support. Domestic violence hotlines, advocacy groups, and legal aid services exist in many communities. You don't have to go through this alone, even if you feel isolated. Ted, there are people and systems ready to stand with you when you choose to speak. When I look back at that night, I don't see victory. I see a daughter who found the courage to knock on my door, and a mother who chose to fight with the tools of the law instead of anger. Putting on my uniform that morning wasn't about revenge. It was about keeping a promise that the law is meant to protect the vulnerable, even when the offender sits at your own family table. If this story resonated with you, share it. Leave a comment with the city you're watching from. Someone else might read your words and feel less alone. And remember, silence only serves those who harm. Speaking up, however hard, can open the door to safety and hope.